Welcome back, Ascenders, to the Ascended Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Mystic Rain. In this episode, I really want to dive really deep into the psyche and how we all process information, how we all process what we perceive to be trauma, previous trauma, childhood trauma, how we process what people may have said about us, how we process how we feel about ourselves, what we think about ourselves, and really help facilitate the process of having us all move with or into a point of ascension in terms of how we feel about ourselves and the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because a lot of times it's not the best that it could be for a lot of people. We all deal with that. We all have our ebbs and flows with the relationships that we have with our mind, with our heart, with our body. And so I really thought that this would be a good episode to talk about something like that. If we're going to What things ultimately boil down to is our ability to control our mind, because our mind is a 3D mind. It is a third dimension mind. It doesn't exist in higher dimensions, at least not while we're presently in this physical body that we have. And it has one hell of an imagination. And so we really have to master the art of controlling our mind and understanding our thoughts. When I say control our mind, what I'm not talking about is control every little thought that races through it, right? Because thoughts are part of the human experience. It's part of the relationship that we have with our ego. It is important and it serves a massive role in terms of our development. But we do need to fall in balance with it. And the majority of us are not in balance with our thoughts. And when we're not in balance with our thoughts, then we're not in balance with our mind. The biggest battle that you will ever face in your life will be the battle that you have with your mind. It will not be the battle that you have with your coworker or with your relationship, your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your spouse or your children or your siblings or your parents or any of that. It's going to be the battle that you have with your mind and what your mind is doing. And so the best way to do this is to recognize that you can observe what's happening in your mind, meaning you can observe what's happening with your thought process from a passive point of view. When you start to find that your mind is racing and it's racing in a way that you would prefer that it doesn't, because sometimes our thoughts have the ability to operate at such a fast speed that it does so before our consciousness has the ability to recognize that it's doing so. But when your consciousness begins to recognize that your thoughts are racing, you can then separate your consciousness from the thoughts themselves, meaning separate your consciousness from your ego body, from the 3D world. And picture yourself almost stepping backwards, like your consciousness or your soul or your higher self stepping backwards outside of your physical body and observing your physical body or observing your thoughts and your thoughts pattern from an objective and neutral point of view. And when those thoughts continue to race, you can see them from a different perspective. You can see that your thoughts are racing from a 3D perspective, and that you will most likely notice that they are not productive thoughts or thoughts that will help you achieve what it is that you want to achieve or get you further down the path towards accomplishing your goals. They are usually incredibly unproductive and incredibly detrimental. And once you have an awareness of this, then you can begin the process of affecting change within yourself, of switching your thoughts around and manipulating your thoughts around to where they are now more positive and resonate at a higher frequency and in a higher vibration. And the only way to do that a lot of times is to understand what your pattern is, what your thought patterns are. What is it that you find stresses you out that causes your mind to race? Like what those categories of thoughts are. And then once you identify those categories, you will be it'll be easier for you to identify when you're approaching that category. You'll start to notice certain triggers in your life that are happening around you that will trigger that particular category of thought patterns. And then you can allow yourself to sort of step outwards, out of your bodies, allow your consciousness to kind of take over, your higher self to kind of take over, in order to observe those thoughts from an objective point of view. And then you can begin to flip them to a positive thing. And this is very much like an exercise, it's a habit that you are forming. It takes a while to form a habit, so you have to do it every time you catch them, and then flip them. And it's very simple to flip them. You take the one word in it that's negative, you find the antonym of that word, the opposite of that word, you plug it in, and then you flipped it. So a very simple example would be this. If you have ever been so low, I think a lot of us can attest to this, where maybe one day you said, oh, I really hate myself. The flip to that is saying, I really like myself. A better flip to that is saying, I really love myself. So what you're doing is simply flipping the negative word in that sentence. And every time you catch yourself say something negative, flip it. Be like, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, and then flip the sentence. What you'll find is that it'll form into a habit, and that your thought pattern will shift with that, and you'll find that your thoughts won't necessarily go so negative so fast. A lot of times what'll happen is that your thoughts will start off as kind of shifting to a neutral. So maybe you feel like you can't get to the love so fast. You'll find that you'll reach a point of almost kind of like indifference. So you may feel like, okay, I may not love myself yet, but I also don't hate myself today. And that is a major accomplishment and major development. And so you'll notice that tiny shift, and then eventually from that milestone, you'll get to the point where it's a lot more positive, where you'll be able to feel those love vibrations and all of that optimism. A lot of times we also struggle with who our former self was. So meaning coming to terms with and reconciling things that happened to us or things that we may have done in our past. And we hold on to those things. We don't heal from them. We don't grieve whatever the situation was. And then so when that happens, we can't grow and develop and move on from that. And so what is something that is really important for you guys to understand, Ascenders, is that you have no obligation to your former self. We have all incarnated to learn, to grow, to evolve, to ascend. We are not supposed to remain our former selves or hold on to our former selves. We are meant to shed that skin like a snake. We are meant to let it go. We are meant to take those lessons and turn that into wisdom, to teach, to help others grow and to ascend, and to genuinely just move on. You do not owe your former self anything. You have no obligation to your former self. It is okay to feel different. It is okay to want to be different. It is to feel like you want to be a changed person in general. There is absolutely nothing that's wrong with that. And you don't have to feel, well, I used to be this way, so I must be that way, or I used to be this way and people expect me to remain that way, so I have to stay that way. None of that can be, or all of that couldn't be farther from the truth. You are allowed and expected to grow and to evolve and to ascend into the beautiful person that you are meant to be, and you're supposed to glow with full sunlight radiance, and there is nothing that needs to hold you back from that, should that be something that you want to do and want to pursue. And once you figure out that way to master your mind, that ultimately will mean that you have figured out the way to master yourself. And once you find that you have mastered yourself by mastering your mind, you will find that you have no enemies, because the enemy all along was your mind. When people observe this process, because it is a beautiful process, the ones that are not on their path of ascension will try to say and do everything to stop you from fulfilling this part of your evolution and growth, to sow doubts, seeds of doubts within you, to make you question what you're doing and question whether or not you are on the right path or if you're making the right decisions and the right choices. But that's okay, because when people start to do that, that means that you have found your path. It is easy to start drowning out the noise of others when you start getting a hand on your mind and on your thoughts and on your thoughts patterns, because once you get to a point where you stop allowing your thoughts to have power over you, because you have learned and recognized that your thoughts is just a physical manifestation of the ego, that the thoughts are simply energy that is moving and passing through, and that every thought that you have is simply a continuation of the previous thought. You have a thought, and then it continues itself, and then it continues itself, and then it continues itself. It's like it has its own little brain, its own little consciousness, its own little realm of intelligence that completes the story. But that no means that your thoughts are your story. And when you understand that, when you understand that it's simply energy that's passing through, you begin to allow it to do so without judgment. And this means that when you start allowing your thoughts to pass without judgment, that you stop holding on to them. And then when you stop holding on to them, they stop having effect on you. And when you get to a place when your thoughts no longer have an effect on you, then you have now reached a place where other people's thoughts stop having an effect on you. And then you further realize that you cannot control how other people see you, and that the only thing that you can do is be you, and being you is okay, because being you is beautiful. It is unnecessary for you to feel the need to fight with your mind, to fight with your thoughts. The only thing that's needed from you is the awareness to observe them. Because when you have the ability to step back and observe, when you see something that you don't like, you then have the ability to change it. And if you allow yourself to be too close to it, if you allow it to affect you to the point where it blinds you to what's going on, then you lack the ability in order to do something about it. Stand back, be impartial, and recognize that your thoughts are just simply manifestations of energy, and that energy is moving, and that you have the power to transmute that energy, because you are an alchemist, and you are an alchemist because you are in the process of ascension, and you have the ability to transmute whatever it is that you don't resonate with. And if you don't resonate with your thoughts, with the current state of your mind, then you have the ability to change it, because it is important to always remember that the biggest battle that you will ever face in your life will be the battle of your mind. Now, for others, you may need to get into the ritual of it. It may not be so simple to simply to separate yourself from the process, or to take on a more objective viewpoint when it comes to your thoughts, because your thoughts can feel so personal. And I have tips and tricks for you guys as well. Take a bath, soak in bath salts and essential oils that ground you, that bring you to the present moment, that make you feel grateful for all that you have, and all that there will be. Allow yourself to be one with nature, to go for walks, to be barefoot so your feet kiss the ground and come in tune with Mother Nature, because Mother Nature is a healer. She's beautiful, she's big, and she's fantastic, and she heals. Mother Nature neutralizes all the energetic imbalances that are going through our body. And when you allow your bare foot to touch the ground, it has the ability to neutralize the energies in your body that are not currently at balance. So you can do that. You can sit in the sun and sun gaze and soak up that vitamin D. You can journal. You can write gratitude letters and write down everything that you're grateful for today and everything that you're grateful for in the future, because that is a fantastic manifestation technique. And you can take active steps to reclaim power over something that oftentimes takes power over us. It oftentimes feels like we don't have the ability to reclaim power over our mind, because it feels like our mind runs us. There's so many of us that can identify with having trouble sleeping, having trouble getting to sleep, having trouble staying asleep once you get to sleep, because the mind is constantly going and the mind is constantly racing. And that is because we give so much focus to it. We give it so much attention. And the mind, the thoughts, a lot of times are simple manifestation of our ego. And our ego, a lot of the times, is not productive. But when we grow in awareness and an understanding of that, this is what we're experiencing, and this is what's actually going on, then it's easier to nurture it, to understand it from a distance, but nurture it and understand that it's still needed, because there's a divine balance of everything, but that it doesn't need to function in a way that's detrimental towards your health or your overall well-being, and that you have a say in what that looks like, and you have a say that in what patterns that you will allow to exist in your life. So your exercise this week, Ascender, is to practice the visualization technique that I gave you earlier of allowing your higher self or your soul to step backwards out of your body when you notice that a thought pattern is starting that doesn't necessarily serve your higher purpose. Step backwards out of your body, or visualize stepping backwards out of your body and looking at yourself, and therefore looking at your thoughts and your thought patterns from an objective, impartial, and an unbiased point of view. And allow yourself to practice the art of acceptance, in terms of accepting the fact that your thoughts and your thought patterns are simply the manifestation of energy that is moving around, and that it is nothing more than that. And accept that you have the power to accept that manifestation of energy moving around if you like it, or rejecting it if you feel like you don't like it and that it doesn't serve your higher purpose. And if you make the decision to reject that thought pattern that has manifested itself in energy, then you can make the decision to transmute it by flipping the negative word in that thought pattern into a positive word, which then flips the whole sentence, and as a default raises the frequency of that thought pattern. And when you raise the frequency of your thought patterns, your vibration and your frequency of your actual being itself begins to raise. And the more it raises, the easier it is for you to transmute into something higher. And the more you transmute, the more your frequency goes up. And so those two things work together. But when you start working with those things, you start activating the alchemist in you, and you start transmuting, and then you start elevating, and you start transcending, and then most importantly, you start the process of ascension, or you continue the process of ascension. So Ascenders, that is your exercise for this week. Your exercise for this week is to grab a hold of your mind, not let it run away from you, and to practice the art of you being in power with it, and you having the ability to transmute things that you feel like no longer serve you, to get you out of that negative mind space or that unproductive mind space, in order to elevate you, to bring you to that frequency level that you want to be. Because when you ascend, it's so much lighter up here. It's so much peaceful. There are so many things and opportunities that come your way. It's so much easier to manifest. It's so much easier to work with the elephants, to produce and bring in the things that you want to actually produce and bring in. So you've got to remember this week that the biggest battle that you'll ever face in your life will be the battle of your mind. And that once you master your mind, then you are in the process of mastering yourself. And when you do that, when you master yourself, you'll find who you are. When you find who you are, you'll know that you'll have no enemies. And most importantly, you won't have yourself as an enemy. So as always, Ascenders, stay inspired and keep ascending.